we think about religions of the world and we think about the relationship that the people have with their God, usually that God is there to provide for the people. And they pay homage to that God and they worship that God and they build shrines to this God, and all to appease this God so that he'll give them what they want. So they never really surrender their will to him. They just kind of surrender some menial possessions or whatever in worship. They never really give of themselves to that God. Because nobody really does that. Nobody really does that. Even when it comes to Christianity, we oftentimes talk about our relationship with God, and we give our heart to him, and we receive Jesus into our heart, and we have all of this flowery language about this relationship with God, but really, who does that? Who does that? Who gives up everything? Like Paul says in Romans chapter 1, chapter 12, who gives up, who submits their body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God? Who does that? Who really gives of themselves? Who really says no to me and everything that I want and yes to God and everything that he wants? We say that when we come down to the altar and we're crying and everything and snot's coming down and we're heaving and I want Jesus. No, who really does? Because when you leave and you go back to doing your own thing, worrying about your own stuff. Who really does that? And when I was thinking about that, I'm thinking about the text, because the text is in 1 Samuel chapter 11. So if you have your Bibles, you want to turn there. If you have your phones, you want to find that, however you do that. Or 1 Samuel chapter 11. And we're going to look at a king who's supposed to be a king, but it's not quite like a king. And there's certain things that he does, and it makes you wonder, who does that? Because the prophet comes to him to make him a king, and he's like, okay, I'm willing to do that. But then, is he really going to be a king? And by the time this is all done with, I hope that we can kind of see ourselves in this text, and not so much as a king here, but in our own lives. Are we king or is God king? And have we really submitted to his lordship in our lives? Because who really does? Who really does? Now, that's the command, that's the call, that he enables us to do that, but are we really doing that when life happens? And as I look at this, and I had kind of all kinds of titles for this message, stand up and where are you? And I'm going to bring all of that out of the text, because we see God has encounters with people, and they encounter God. And we talked about that in Sunday school, but sometimes it doesn't ever change their lives. There's no transformation that takes place. And I have to ask you, has a transformation taken place in your life since Christ came into your life? Since you had a saving knowledge of him, not just an intellectual knowledge, not just a cognitive knowledge, not just a basic historical understanding of this factual character in the narrative called the Bible, do you really have an understanding of who he is, so much so that you've given your life away so that he can use you? Has that really happened? Has that really taken place? Because I'm wondering, does anybody really do that? But then there's a kind of a funny sense of that word where you look at, like, really, who does that? Like a white woman calling herself black. Like, who does that? Yeah, I didn't get that, but anyway. Or a woman running for public office and talks about she's willing to attend a public hanging. Who does that? It's so ridiculous. Who does that? But it even happens in the church, way back in the day when they used to have communion wine, and, people would be back in the back. Who does that? Some of y'all say, I know who did that. It's happened in churches. Or the whole offering thing, we don't do it so much. We don't do it now because we realize it's illegal, but when you used to make change in the offering, and a person would put 20 in and get $25 out, who does that in the church? It's crazy things that people do. And you wonder, who does that? Who does things like that? And you look in the text and you see, because I love the Bible because it's so real and it asks questions and it presents a narrative. And you're wondering, how in the world did this really happen? As we look at chapter 11 of 1 Samuel, we see a thing going on as they've made this guy Saul king over Israel. And they make him king, and at his inauguration, they find him hiding under a table. Who does that? Who has a prophet come to them saying, God is saying, you're going to be the next king of the first king of Israel, and you're hiding under a table? And if that's not bad enough, they find him under the table and they say, come on out because we want to make you king. If your king is hiding under a table, he's not king worthy. I mean, you need to say, you can go on home because obviously we picked the wrong one. But they still want to make him king. And this isn't the first time Israel has done this. Back in Judges chapter 9, I believe it is, there's Abimelech, and they wanted to make him king over Shechem. So this isn't the first time they've done something like that. They've done this in the past. And then God even presented that this guy is really not going to be king because I'm king over Israel. So, but now here, God is saying, okay, you want a king? We're going to give you a king. And oftentimes in our lives, God is saying, you want to be king? Okay, I'm going to let you be king. You think, if I'm not providing for you well enough, you provide for yourself. You want to be king? You can have this thing. You said I was Lord over your life. You submitted your life to me. You humbled yourself before me. But now you want to be king? Go ahead, be king. So they wanted a king to represent them. And now we find them in 1 Samuel chapter 11. And this guy Nahash, the Ammonite, he besieged them at Jabez Gilead. Now, to besiege someone, this is what besiege means. It means that they encamp round about you. They close you off from everything outside of you, so you're not able to get outside of your little community to get anything because the enemy is all around you. They're encamped all around you. You're sieged. On every side, you're hemmed in. You can't get out to get food. You can't get out to get water. You can't get out to get help. So, I mean, how does that look like in our life? What does that look like in our life? It's when life is so bad, you can't even get a prayer out. All you have is what's left on the inside. All they have is what's left on the inside. And all the enemy does, the enemy never advances against them. They just sit there and make their presence known. They just sit there and they wait them out. They sit there until they run out of food. They sit there until they run out of water. They sit there until they run out of hope. And they finally give in. And some of us have been in that situation where we've been in a situation so long, it seems like it's just waiting us out. I've run out of money. I've run out of time. I've run out of friends. I've run out of help. I've run out of hope. And it seems like the enemy has besieged me on every side. What do you do? So what do? They decide that they're going to come to terms with them and say, okay, we'll surrender. So what are your terms of surrender? What does it take to, so we're going to surrender. What do you want from us? You're besieging us. What do you want? We'll submit to you. We'll surrender to you. But what do you want? Well, the first question we have to ask as a believer, the first question we have to ask Israel, if God was your king and he delivered you out of Egypt, if he delivered you through the wilderness, if he's delivered you through all the judges and all the things that have happened to you, he's delivered you, why are you coming to terms with the enemy? Why are you coming to surrender terms with the enemy? Why are you giving up? Who does that when God is their God and he showed himself as God? Who surrenders to the enemy? The God that created everything, that spoke a word and the world came into existence. Who gives up on that kind of God? We do. We do. And we find ourselves just playing games with God. Just playing games. Just playing games with him. Because after all, he created the world, but this is my world. And I'm the king in it. This is my thing. And the problem is, he can control his world, but I'm struggling trying to control mine. And when somebody wants my world, and I can't protect it, what am I going to do? I got to give up. I got to give up. But they ask him, so what are the terms of surrender? He says, this is what I want you to do. I want all y'all to pluck out your right eye, because I just want to embarrass you, humiliate you, and make you look crazy. I really want to make you look foolish. I want to make you look weak, because it's your right eye. I want you weak, and I want you to look foolish. And oftentimes the enemy does that to you. When it comes to, instead of trusting in God, you're trusting in your own abilities, you're trusting in your own means, you're trusting in your own wit, and you come to the end of yourself. You say, well, I surrender. So what do you want? I just want to make you look foolish. I really want you to look foolish. I want you crying, and it's like the person where they're in a relationship and the person wants to leave them, and they're clawing and they're screaming and they're crying and they're out in the driveway, and the person's trying to pull off and they're hanging on to the car, and who does that? does that? Who bases themselves like that? That nobody's worth all of that. Who's nobody's worth you just acting a complete idiot. Who's the guy on Facebook, the little act, he was crying on, you know, that comedian, actor or whatever, he's crying about his baby mama or whatever. Who does that? Who does that in front of millions of people? How do you let someone bring you so low that you're willing to just make yourself look foolish in front of everyone when there's a better way? When there's a God who loves you and wants to provide for you and care for you and deliver you. But you don't even ask him. You ask the person that wants to hold you captive. You ask the person that's besieging you on every side. Pluck out your eye. But if that's not bad enough, you see their response? Give us a week to think about it. What are you thinking about? He wants to pluck out your eye. And you're going to think about this? At this point, it's time that I may not win, but I'm going to fight. You know, I may lose my life, but I'm going to keep my eyes. It's just not going. It's not going down like that. Who does that? Who says, okay, well, let me think about this. Give us 7 days, and we're going to talk to a few folk about this. You're actually going to get some counsel? And many times we're in situations like that where someone is treating you wrong. They're using you, misusing you, and abusing you, and treating you wrong. And you're like, well, let me talk to my pastor about it. Don't talk to me about it. I mean, I got one word. Leave. Get out. Why are you in there? Why are you even there? That makes me think about Adam and Eve. You know, they're in the garden. God says there's one thing. Everything is yours. Just don't mess with that one tree. And where did they go? That one tree. I mean, you got the whole world at your disposal. You want to go to this one little bush and hang out there. Don't know why. I mean, and then not only that, but they partake of the fruit, they eat of it, and now they're hiding out. And God is walking through the garden, and he's like, where are you? Where are you? What are you doing there? I loved you. I gave you everything. I provided for your every need, your every want. You did wrong, and now you're hiding from me. Instead of apologizing, admitting that you're wrong, instead of repenting, we don't repent. We just hide from God. We hide from others. We think that we have some kind of secret sin, and everybody sees our stuff. It's written on your face. And God is saying, why are you still, you've been there for 6 years. Why are you still there? Why are you still in that? Why are you in such turmoil? Why are you in such distress? Why are you in such peril? Why are you so depressed when you don't have to be? There was a story that I read, and I found it kind of interesting as I'm talking about who does that. This is a lady at a Presbyterian church. They were having some kind of a bake sale or whatever, and this lady, she always made the most beautiful cakes. She always made these wonderful cakes. And of course, every year they expect that out of her. So this year was no different. But she was a busy woman. She was a socialite. She was busy in the community, running around doing all these things in politics and social activities and things of that nature. So this year she put off baking this cake until the last minute. So in the last minute, she ran in there, threw everything together, baked the cake or whatever. And then when the cake came out of the oven, she was horrified because the cake had fallen in the middle. Now, I don't know much about cooking, so I guess that means that there was a dip in the middle, and that's a bad thing, because I'm like, just put some frosting over that thing, and it's still good. I mean, it's done. I mean, if it's done, it's good, you know, but I guess you all want to make it look good too, or whatever, but I mean, you cut it up in slices, they don't even know it fell, right? but obviously it was an issue for her, and she was stressed out about it. So she didn't have the ingredients to make another cake, she didn't have the time to make another cake, and she started panicking. And she frantically started looking around. What am I gonna do? She came up with this ingenious plan. She said, I'll find a way to fix this cake. And what she did was, she came up with this plan to fix the cake, and not only that, she came up with a plan that, okay, since I fixed the cake, I'm gonna be the first one there to buy the cake so nobody knows how I fixed it. So you guys are wondering, well, what did she do to fix this cake? So she looked around the room, she was trying to figure out, how do I fix this cake? And she came up with this plan. She said, I got this toilet paper roll. I could take that and put it up underneath the cake, and I could prop it up and, and cover it. Nobody will be the wiser. And I'm going to be the first one in there to get this cake, and then I could buy it and nobody will know. So that's what she did. She kind of propped the cake up, and she, frosted it, and she made it bright yellow so she could recognize her cake. And then she took it there, and she put it, and she took it to the back or wherever the people were at, and they were going to put it out there to present it. So then she goes into the room where they're presenting the cakes, and she looks, and she's looking for her cake. Her cake's not there. She's like, what happened to my cake? Where's my cake? Oh my goodness. Now she's stressing out. She runs to the back to ask them, what happened to the bright yellow cake? There was like, somebody bought that cake. I don't know who. So somebody bought it before they ever presented it. I guess it looked so good. And she was like, what am I going to do now? Somebody bought the cake. What? Who bought the cake? And they're like, there's a lot of people. We don't know who bought the cake. We have no idea who bought the cake. And not only that, so she goes out there. She's stressed out about it. And then the event's over. There's nothing she could do about it. All she could think is somebody's got this cake, and they're going to find out it was me that made that cake, and I'll never be able to make a cake again. She left that event. She's like, oh, it's over. I'm done. So she had another event that she had to go to at the mayor's mansion or whatever. She goes there, and then she goes into the room. She's a little late. She's rushing to get there. She walks into the room, and she sees the table is spread, and it's a big, beautiful table. At the center of the table is what? Her cake. Her cake. Her cake is at the middle of the table. The mayor's wife purchased the cake at church, had it at the centerpiece of the table, and now her cake is there, and now she has to find out and it goes, when she got there, she almost died right where she stood, because there at the center of a brilliantly decorated table was a bright yellow cake. And then it says, she debated ... And then in blue letters after that, continue reading this sermon illustration free with, what? Who stops me in the middle of the story like that? Who does that? I don't even know now I don't know what happens. And I was so frustrated I had to share it with you so you could be frustrated with me. We don't know what happened. What does she do next? I don't know. You make it up yourself. I don't know. But who does that? Who does that? And so many times we do the same thing. We try to cover up stuff in our lives with makeshift, weird, nasty stuff, thinking nobody will ever know. And then all of a sudden we get put out there like the king gets put out there to be king, and he's like, I'm not ready to do this. Even though I'm head and shoulders above the rest, and I've been faking it all along, I'm not ready to do this. Because we find, when you go back to the text, you find as this happens, they go out and they send out a message. This guy wants to pluck out our eyes. What are we going to do? Word gets back to the king, Saul. And you know where he is? He's out with some oxen plowing the field. Who does that? Who's the king and he's out with ox? Aren't you supposed to be on a throne somewhere, governing, doing something, and you went back to what you used to do? Just like us. We ask Jesus to come into our lives, come into our heart, transform our lives, make us new, do a new thing in my life. I want to walk new, I want to talk new, I want to see new, and then I go back to the same old thing I used to do. Who does that? Who has an encounter with God and goes back home? No, you don't do that. I'm kind of like the guy that's in the tombs and cutting myself and filled with demons, and who's in there? Legion. I had to, and then once they're all gone, you're like, bet, I'm not staying here. They went into the pigs went over the hill, don't know where they went after that, but I'm staying next to Jesus. Who goes back to their old self? Who goes back to their old stuff? You get cleaned up and you go back to the old mess. You find that person says, I don't need you anymore. You can go ahead and hit the bricks. And you're like, no, I want to go back. No, who does that? Who goes back to the one that besieges them? Who goes back to the place where they used to be when God is calling you to something new, something better? Who does that? We do. We do. You see, when under pressure, trust God, not wisdom based on your own understanding of the circumstance. Because many times we don't get the circumstance. Just as they're besieged on every side here, a like story you find in the prophets where the prophet was there and his servant goes out and he says the whole army, Syrian army, is all around us, encamped all around us. And the prophet simply says to God, God, open his eyes that he could see. And then when he opens the servant's eyes, the servant sees the angels of the Lord encamped all around that. He's saying there's nothing to worry about. We get stressed out about our lives, and you may be stressed out about something in your life right now, and that's all you can think about, and that's all you can pray about. And so instead of focusing on what God is doing, you're focusing on your own little world and what you're doing. And that's all you can think about, your own little world. And there's a whole big world out there that God wants to use you to bless, but all you can think about is my world's a mess. And God is like, I got your world. If you would just give me your world, I got your world. I want you operating in my world, because in my world, you don't have the stress that you have right now. In my world, you have peace that you can't even explain. In my world, in the midst of the storm, I'm your covering in my world. So why are you caught up in your world? I got your world. I got your world. Matter of fact, I allowed the storm in your world so you'll leave your world and come into my world. So why are you there? Who does that? Who stays in the rain when they can come under the covering? Because we're looking at the circumstances and we see it the way we see it. But see, when we live holy where God is, we remain above the circumstance. See, God is other than. See, he's above all of that. He's not caught up in sandbox squabbles. He's not caught up in playground issues. He's not caught up in your stuff. Because when it's us and it's left to our world, we try to bargain our way out of it. And the crazy thing is, we bargain with the enemy. We bargain with the enemy. Instead of talking to God about it, we bargain with the enemy because for some reason we feel like God doesn't care or God doesn't understand. And after all, it's my world. So I have to do the best I can to protect my world. But when we're about God's plan and not ours, we have peace. So be about God's plan. So if you're called by God, why are you going back to your old life? If God called you and drew him to himself, why are you going back to your old life? And many times it's because of fear. It's because of fear. I don't know. I know what my life is, but I don't know what this new life is. So, but don't allow fear to keep you from being faithful to God. Don't allow fear. Well, if I come to God, I might not be able to do everything he's asking me to do. If I come to God, I might not be able to perform all the things he's asking me to perform. If I come to God, I might not be good enough. Why allow fear to keep you from coming to God? We don't allow fear to keep us from going into relationships. We don't allow fear to keep us from going into jobs. We don't allow fear to keep us from enrolling in school. We don't allow fear to keep us from anything else other than serving God, because we think that we're going to lose something that we never had, really. Don't allow lack of information to cause you to move slowly towards God's plan. I don't know enough about God. I don't know enough about the Bible. I don't know enough about church. Well, he didn't call you to church. He called you to himself. You go to church, but you come to God. You serve in church. You learn more about God in church. It's not about whether you know how to usher or whether you know how to sing or you know how to be a deacon or you know how to preach. It's about, do you know God? I don't know how to be a witness. I don't know how to share my testimony. Do you know God? That's what come to know me. That's what he's calling us to. And so, no, you don't have all the information in the beginning. But the more you grow, the more information you get about him. But unfortunately, we try to get more information about the organization and never get information about God. See, all God asks is that you show up. Because see, God will show out if you show up. And that's what he does in this text. So they get excited. They send word out. The king is plowing. He hears about this thing, and he says, and he gets this righteous indignation. It says the Spirit of God came upon him, and he tears up the plow, he cuts up the oxen, and he sends it out to all the people. And he says, listen, if you don't get on board with this battle, what I did to these oxen, I'm going to do to your oxen as well. So you're going to lose one way or the other. Either you're going to lose it to this king, the Ammonites, or you're going to lose it to me, because we're going to tear your whole life apart until you surrender your life. And God is saying, listen, if you give your heart to me, I'm going to wreck your whole life until you're willing to let me have control of your life, if you're truly giving it to me. Because so many of us are trying to hold on to our possessions and trying to scheme our way into getting into heaven, but still enjoying the world. God is saying, you got to let go. You will never enjoy this world until you see it from heaven's view. You never will. You never will. But so many times we're trying to scheme our way into things. And at the end of the day, God performs a work that they could not perform. 330 men out of Israel and Judah come out to fight, and they defeat these Ammonites, and they run them off. God does it. God does it. They didn't do it. God did it. And you are not going to fix your situation. God is. And when God fixes your situation, give him glory, give him honor, give him praise, because God is the one who did it. You got to trust him. You got to see him. You got to rejoice in him, and you got to stop scheming. Some of you might be saying, who preaches a sermon with a little basketball? Who does that? Because there's so many times when I stand up here and I share and I have this good story I want to tell you guys. And I forget it, and I go home and it's like, that's the story I want to tell you. Because last Sunday there was a story I want to tell you guys, and I forgot it. And I still don't remember it. But this one I didn't want to forget, because this one is kind of close to home. When I was in the military, I used to work in a lot of jobs, and one of them was in legal, and I did a lot of stuff. It wasn't NCIS, and whatever it is. It wasn't that, but it was like real legal in the military. And did a lot of investigations, a lot of stuff, and heard this story about this one guy. He joined the Navy because at the recruiter's office, he told him you could play, he was play basketball or whatever, but he couldn't get into college or whatever the case may be. They said, but if you go in the military, you go in the Navy, they got a basketball team. You could be on the basketball team. And so he joins, and he makes the basketball team. And he played the entire season, the preseason and everything. And then when the season was over, they said, well, now you need to go back to your command. He said, go back where? I joined to play basketball. I thought you had, the command was like basketball. I thought that's what I was going to do. He was like, no, bro, you got to serve. So you got to go to your command. He was like, no, I'm not going to the command. Yes, you are going to the command. You got two options. You go to the brig or you go to your command. It's like, all right, I'll go to the command. He got to the command, and they were like, well, this is your job. He's like, I'm not doing that. So he said, I want out. They were like, well, you can't get out. I mean, you have to serve. He was like, no, I want out. He was like, no, you're not getting out. So he came up with a plan. Basketball is what he loved. Basketball is what he did. So he got his basketball. And he just kept his basketball. Everywhere he went, he had his basketball. He dribbled his basketball everywhere he went. He went to the bathroom. He was in there with the basketball. He went to eat. He was in there with the basketball. He went to sleep. He slept with his basketball. He went to work, whatever he was supposed to be doing, had his basketball. Everything he did, he had his basketball. And people are looking at him like really? Who does that? Had his basketball. And he did this for, it must have been a year or so. So they finally realized, okay, this guy, he's not altogether there. We need to get rid of him. This is not going to work in the Navy. He's on a ship with a basketball. So they processed him for a psychological, mental discharge, and he didn't care. He just wanted out because he didn't want to be in the military. He just wanted to play basketball. And long story short, he goes in front of the commanding officer. They're signing the final papers, and he has his basketball. Now he's in there in front of the commanding officer at a court-martial with a basketball. I mean, this is convincing at this point. He's not all there. He wanted to play basketball. They didn't let him play basketball. He had to work, so signs the papers, and he gets ready to leave. And he takes the basketball, goes over to his commanding officer, gives him the basketball. Now, this guy has been with his basketball for at least 2 years out of his military career. And now all of a sudden he's leaving, and he gives up the basketball. They're like, wait a minute, Seaman Jones, I thought you had to have your basketball. Why don't you have your basketball? He looked at him and he smiled. He said, game over. Game over. It's all a game. Who does that? Who does that? Who plays with their life all the way up to the end? And now the game's over. But my question to you is, when your game is over, who was your commanding officer? How much did they put up with? What was your scheme? What was your game throughout all of life? What were you trying to get out of this thing? Because you didn't get your way, I'm not going to serve God. Because life isn't turning out the way I want, I'm going to scheme with the things of this world in order to get my way? At what point are we going to say, God, you're king, I'm not. I'm going to do exactly what you say. I'm going to live exactly the way you lived. I'm going to do what you do. Because really, this is not a game. This is serious business. In all the storms that are going on in your life, when you show up to serve God, God will truly show out and show himself faithful.